Hi, I'm Ann Coulter. Welcome to my Substack Unsafe. I have an interview I've been dying to do, particularly after the death of Charlie Kirk, and my column this week that I assume you all read. Um, Corrina Cohn, I've heard about you for years from my friend Pamela Poretsky as the sane, reasonable, and thoughtful transgender who has been through a lot. And I've read some of your articles, the Washington Post, What I Wish I'd Known When I Was 19 and Had Sex Reassignment Surgery. And in Quillette, for 30 years, I've tried to become a woman. Here's what I learned along the way. Really interesting articles. I highly recommend them. You've given testimony opposing girls, transgenders in girls' sports. So after this latest assassin, Charlie Kirk, of Charlie Kirk, so you have a very angry left-wing gay guy, romantically involved with a transgender. Apparently, he was also really into the furries, and who would expect the furries to have anything wrong with them? But there have been a series of these since at least 2018, the public mass shootings. And I think everyone in America has noticed that the trans community seems to be producing a lot of homicidal psychopaths. Everyone except anyone in the media. And I want to ask you about some other things, but I specifically want you to explain that. You know transgenders, you're obviously empathetic to transgenders, and I suspect you've seen the same thing everyone except those in the media have. So welcome, Corrina.
Yeah, thank you so much, Anne. I've been testifying in state houses for bills that would restrict the ability for doctors to perform sex trait modification on children. And as you said, in order to protect the rights of girls and women to participate in their own sex category in sports. And every time that I've shown up to give testimony, there's been hundreds of activists. And you have to give the trans rights organizations a lot of credit. They're excellent organizers. But some of their tactics are really questionable. And one of them that I saw a couple of times across the country is that they did this thing called a die-in, which is they asked young people to emulate their own deaths on the floors of these state capitals where they would all lie down and pretend to be dead. They said, if you pass this legislation, you're going to kill all of us. And I think that this is a really poisonous thing to tell young people, that legislation, which this is our democratic process, the same thing that Charlie Kirk was advocating for, which is let's go and discuss our different viewpoints on legislation and make our best case. Mm-hmm. And these young people are not being taught that that's the process. They're being taught to go and have hysterics, which include acting out the process of you dying in front of these lawmakers. And this sort of mentality is really a nihilistic type of psychology to embed in these impressionable young people.
Yes, it almost seems kind of drama queenish, though I think they may have gotten that from the feminists who for years, threatened if you ban abortion, we're going to die in back alley abortions. Well, okay, don't have a back alley abortion. But the threat of death is very popular on the left. And I gather a lot of these trans were coming after the activists, as you say, were coming after you for your testimony. So you know how scary and vicious they are.
There's this part of the culture in the trans rights side of the world that there's a trans genocide happening, that everybody who opposes them, they don't have any rational arguments. It is that they simply want to have the complete erasure and destruction of every trans person. Mm-hmm. So they can't even find their way to have reasonable discourse. For them, it's completely existential. The people who are angry when I show up, they're not engaging me with having a difference of opinion. They see me as a traitor who is coming in to usher in or herald their destruction. It's really this sort of black and white psychology that pushes the extremists in their group further and further and further towards rationalizing violence as a response.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I've noticed for a long time, been dying to give you my own theory on this, that there is a subset within the group of normal gays, that is just scary and vicious. And you just reminded me, it kind of goes back to the AIDS thing where they'd be spitting the host out in St. Patrick's Cathedral. And look, there was funding for AIDS. At this point, probably the only things the government is funding are AIDS research and breast cancer research. Don't worry, you got your research, but there was just this hatred and you're killing us, you're killing us. Well, a cure isn't going to come overnight. Money doesn't necessarily get you your cure, but that's what the argument is. You are killing us. Ronald Reagan is killing us. Ronald Reagan, half his friends were gays from Hollywood. And it used to be the people that, I have a lot of liberal protesters, but the ones who scared me the most were obviously not all gays, also a lot of gay fans, but the angry gays. And they were just a different kind of animal. And I feel like since gay marriage was legalized, suddenly this transgender thing flourished and the angry gays moved on to the transgender gays. And if we capitulate on that, they're going to be the pedophile gays or the polygamy types. But I feel like the angry gays, and now the angry are now become the angry transgenders, aren't even real gays. I think they start hating the world. They hate humanity. They really hate their dads. And this is just a way to be angry and destroy themselves. And that's why a lot of the psychopaths seem to keep coming from that community. What do you think of my theory?
So from somebody from more on the outside of the LGBT circle, I can see how that impression could be formed. Do you mind if I maybe elaborate it from somebody more on the inside?
No, please do.
So, and you've probably recognized this, but for time immemorial, there have been people who they don't want their sexual orientation to be the first thing that you learn about them. They want to pursue their careers, they want to be part of their communities, and that if they happen to be married or partnered with somebody of the same sex, that is a facet of who they are, not really central to how they want to relate to everybody else around them. And then there are also people who always have felt marginalized, where they, as children, they might have been bullied or isolated. And as adults, they carry a lot of resentment for that treatment. And their response to it is that they want to tear systems down.
Yes. Yes. Okay. That totally makes sense. Yes, I can see that.
The term queer liberation, you may say that that's a less generous interpretation of that, is angry people with a chip on their shoulder, many of whom may be same-sex attracted, but as you pointed out, you said some of them seem like they're not even gay. Some of them are not same-sex attracted, but what they really believe is, since they don't have a place inside of the existing power structure, or they don't see a way to get that place, that they feel justified in destroying it. The system.
Yes. Yes. And do you think gays and transgenders have noticed there have been a lot of mass shootings by transgenders? I mean, it's got to be striking people. Everyone thought when this first happened, I mean, particularly because Charlie Kirk happened to be answering a question about, I don't know, I think it was about public school shootings, but definitely transgenders when he was shot. It just seems like everyone was sort of saying nothing but expecting it, saying nothing but expecting it.
Right.
And then we find out, yes, his romantic partner is a transgender, and he was on all these transgender boards, and he said he was doing it out of love, apparently, for his transgender partner. One of the things I kind of like to see, I mean, the transgender romantic partner, the transgender boyfriend, or he's transitioning now, I guess, he was shocked, quite obviously, and immediately started cooperating with the police. So we're not even talking about all transgenders, but there is some segment of that community that is dangerously psychotic.
They are. So you could say that about any community. And I do want to maybe try to push a little bit on this, because I have a podcast that I do with my friend Nina Paley, where we talked about this recently, where we have a cognitive bias where the things that just happened, because there had been the shooting a week before with a trans-identified person in Minnesota, right?
Right.
So that is on our mind. And because now this other thing happened, we are primed and waiting to hear that information. And as soon as it happens, we're like, aha, the thing that I was just thinking about because it happened last week happened again. And that's proof that there's like this trend happening. We have to be cautious about having that sort of cognitive bias. However, as you started saying, if you go back to 2018 or about that time frame, we're seeing this happening more and more and more. My belief is that a lot of the responsibility for keeping this from happening belongs in the hands of the gay and lesbian rights groups, who create a lot of influence and messaging around what is happening in the culture. So instead of encouraging these young people to develop resilience and organizing in a way that's productive or proactive, they're encouraging them to become hyperbolic and stressed out, right? So they're amping up the stress knowingly, because that's what's creating the organizing pressure. So they're taking advantage of young people, many of whom who are attracted to transitioning are already not very mentally healthy. So these leaders are manipulating a group of young people who really deserve to have a lot better guidance from their community leaders. The other part of the, sorry.
No, go ahead.
The other part of the blame, in my opinion, belongs to the mainstream media, who amplify these messages uncritically. And when they say, oh, there's a genocide happening, instead of saying, well, in fact, there's a very small number of acts of violence against trans-identified people, this is exaggerated, right? There's no Pinocchio score for the most popular trans communicators, but they have hundreds of thousands of people in their network. They're influencing them, but nobody in the mainstream media wants to do anything about it. And in fact, over the past 10 years, the trans organizers have infiltrated the news desks and opinion desks of these mainstream media outlets to tie their hands so that they're not providing any sort of critical feedback, which might eventually filter down and influence these young people. So they are not getting clear messages, and they're not able to orient themselves correctly to what is happening around them. So they get scared and they lash out.